I'll just tell you one thing that I heard from Reb Shlomo. He said in the name of the Zohar that I find this is to me one of the most chilling Torahs that I know. And he said that basically the spies got to the land of Israel, and they looked up into the heavenly bank account of the Jewish people. That's the phrase that he used. That's how he said it. They looked up into the heavenly bank account of the Jewish people, and that they saw that we didn't have enough merit. We didn't have enough schusim to merit going into the land of Israel. And what were they missing? They were right. But what were they missing? That God can give it to us as a gift. And a lot of times, that to me that's a very life-giving Torah, because a lot of times there's certain junctures in our life where we're sort of like, we want something or we're aspiring towards something, and maybe we say, I'm not worthy, but you know what? In truth, you might actually not be worthy. You know what I mean? It's not just like a thing to say. You might legitimately not be worthy. However, that doesn't mean that Hashem can't give it to you as a gift. And so that's something that we should always have in mind, that God has that ability always. But that's not the thing I wanted to tell you. It's that the spies looked into the land and they saw rivers of blood coming out of the land. And they saw every tragedy that was ever going to befall the Jewish people. And except they didn't see one thing. You ready for this? That it was all going to happen because of them. To me, that's chilling. That's chilling. They saw every bad thing that was ever going to happen to the Jewish people, but they didn't realize that it was because of them. That one thing they didn't see. So a lot is said about the spies, and then there are more famous teachings that I'm sure you're already familiar with, but I want to talk about it from a different perspective. And my profession is as a writer. And so that means that I don't really describe myself this way, but I guess you could call me a storyteller. Because that's, if you write a script, that's a story. So you have to know how to write a story. So if you looked at the Chumash as a story, right, and it's functioning on a zillion levels, so why not also look at it as a story? If you look at it as a story, what is the main plot of the story? And, if we had more time, I'd go around the table, and I'm sure you'd all get the right answer. The main single major, what we would call in script writing, the A story, that means the primary story, the A story of the Chumash is the journey of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. They get promised the land of Israel in Bereshis. All of Shmos is about taking them out of Egypt in order to bring them into the land. Then you've got, all of Bamidbar is the preparation, all the mistakes wandering on the desert on the way to the land. And then at the end of Devarim, they're right on the edge of entering the land, and then Devarim ends. Okay, so clearly, if you were, and all of us were there, we all journeyed through Egypt together. They say, I don't know. Right now, at least in these generations, they say, Kabbalistically at least, the idea, we believe in reincarnation, but the idea of new souls coming into the world in these later generations, new souls are considered very rare. So you can assume that you've been here not only before, but probably multiple times, right? My wife has a new campaign that she's been saying to me and her friends. It's based on something from the Kutzker Rebbe, and actually this teaching is also in Rebbe Nachman. I saw it in Rebbe Nachman as well. And it turns out, this was a surprise to me, that the Kutzker Rebbe was loved Breslov. You wouldn't necessarily put those two movements together, Kutzk and Breslov. He had great admiration for Rebbe Nachman. Anyway, so this teaching is also in Rebbe Nachman. Maybe that's where he got it from, I have no idea. But I heard this from Reb Shlomo, that the Kutzker Rebbe would say to his Talmidim, he would say, at the end of 120, and we're talking about the Talmidim of the Kutzker Rebbe, so obviously they were on a very, very high level. he said to his Talmidim, don't kid yourself. You're going to be offered one of two things at the end of 120. Either reincarnation or Gehenna. Choose Gehenna. The idea being that reincarnation, coming back into this world, is, it's a very, very dicey proposition, being in this world. And who's to say if a person comes back that they're going to come out ahead? It's like, I'm just flashing on the imagery, like, let's say you're on a roll in Vegas and you've got all these chips and you keep on, you do another round of double or nothing. You really want to do that? Like, that feels kind of risky to me. And that is a bit what we all chose. Now, why did we all chose? Because everyone in this room chose reincarnation. Why did we all choose that? So, this is just me talking right now, because I think we looked at the other choice, Gehenna, and it was so absolutely terrifying, absolutely completely terrifying, that we were like, anything but that. But the Rebbes say, choose Gehenna. Why? Because it will be over, especially if you do tshuva in this world. It's not, what do I know about Gehenna? But it's over, and then you're done. One second. Yeah, it's over and then you're done. So my wife's current campaign is a T-shirt that says, "I'm not coming back," on one side, and choose Gehenna on the other side. Now, as far as merch goes, I don't know if that's going to be a bestseller, but it definitely sends a message, and it definitely sort of focuses us in a good way, which is going to get us back to the spies right now, focuses us in a good way, which is, what is this journey that we're on? And the idea of, I think that it's a bit intense to live this way, but I don't think it's a bad way to live this way, which is to say, I'm not coming back. I want to live my life, this lifetime right now, I'm not coming back. I'm going to get it right. To the extent that I can get it right, I'm going to get it right this time. Because I haven't in previous times. For whatever reason, whatever I need to fix. By the way, just so you know, if you're wondering, well, what do I have to do this lifetime not to come back? I heard an interesting teaching, and this teaching used to really make me mad until I really thought about it, and I heard this explanation. That what you need to fix is what's hardest for you. And so that's the answer I don't want to hear. Because I don't want to do it. I'm intentionally not doing what's hardest for me. Why? Because it's so hard. That's why I don't want to do it. But what is the logic behind that? And the logic behind that, I think, is very intriguing and makes a lot of sense. Which is that, why is it so hard for me in this lifetime? Because I fixed the other things in my previous lifetime. Or lifetimes. That's why those things are easier for me right now. And the reason why this thing is so hard for me right now is because that is dafka what I haven't fixed and what I still need to fix. So if you kind of look at a difficult challenge in your life in that way, that let me get it right this time, and there's a reason why it's so hard, then you can sort of like roll up your sleeves and maybe reapproach it with a different attitude. Right? So that's okay. But let's get back to the spice. The idea is, what I'm saying is that the Chumash is telling one main overriding story. And that one main overriding story from Breshis to the end of Devarim, even the first pasuk of Breshis. What's the Rashi in the first pasuk of Breshis? That why is the Torah beginning with the creation of the world and not with the first mitzvah? Because in the future, the non-Jews are going to say that the Jewish people stole the land of Israel from the non-Jews. And so the Torah is beginning with God who created the world, because God who created the world belongs to God, and he can give the land of Israel or any land to anyone who he wants to, because it belongs to him. So you see from the very first pasuk of the Torah, it's already talking about the Jews going into the land of Israel. If you want an additional support that that's the main story of the Torah. Okay? And I'll just tell you, just as an aside, How do you think people were learning? When Rashi wrote this, approximately 1,000 years ago, we had been out of the land for 1,000 years. It was going to be another 1,000 years approximately till we got into the land. And they're reading this Rashi saying, oh, we're going to go into the land of Israel and then the nations are going to say that you stole it from us? How do you think they were learning that? Like, I guess, it's a Rashi. I guess this is our tradition. And yet, this is current events for us. Current events. And it just shows you that if we don't understand one of the comments of one of the Chachamim, it just means that we aren't fully appreciating it, or we don't realize how relevant everything that they're saying is. And think about that as an example. Anyway, so the main story, imagine, we were probably in the generation of the desert, but I hope that none of us were in the generation of the desert. I hope that we all got it right by now, but nonetheless, that's still collectively speaking us. We're traveling through the desert, and now all these miracles have happened. God has taken us out of Egypt in the most amazing, amazing way, given us the Torah in the most amazing way, split the sea in the most amazing way. And now it seems like, listen, if I can lift 1,000 pounds, I can lift 20 pounds. Right? God has already, so to speak, lifted 1,000 pounds. You don't think he can defeat an army in Israel? To me, that seems like a lower miracle from my perspective, right? But from their perspective, they're being told that they're being brought to their death. God is leading you to your death, which is like really, that's really so severe. You can almost sympathize with Hashem that why he got so upset that he doesn't want to deal with this generation anymore. You think I, who took you out of Egypt with miracles and gave you the Torah with miracles and saved you and split the sea and am raining man down from you from heaven and this well of Miriam and these clouds of glory, you think that I'm bringing you into Israel to kill you?
It's true.
Like, what? If that's what you think at this point, we can't do business. So the generation has to wander and everything like this. So here's really my point. Here's what I'm getting to. These people / us, right? The Jews in the desert, us. We had no idea what story God was telling. What is the story that God's telling about the Jews going into the land of Israel? And we get to this place where it's sort of like, okay, we're about to go in, and all of a sudden we go, It's like, how could we go no when the story that's being told is us going in? So when I thought about that, it got me thinking, wow, because each one of us in our own individual lives is having a story told through us. And to what extent are you, am I, are all of us aware of the story that God is telling through our individual lives right now? And are we on board with the story that's being told with our life or not? Because the whole Chumash is resting on this one moment when the spies come back and say, it's going to be a tough fight. And we go, come on, who are they up against? They're up against Hashem. Look around, look at these clouds, look at that well, look at this man. You crazy? You think any of them have a chance against God? That was our moment. That was our moment to know the story that we were in, and we didn't even know the story that we were in. Okay, I'll give you another example. The Gemara says that those who mourn the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash will be zocha, will merit to celebrate when it's rebuilt. So let's think about that for a second, because I have a question on that. There's a very happy occasion. The Beis HaMikdash is being rebuilt. The Chachamim are telling me that I'm not going to be able to celebrate. Why shouldn't I be able to celebrate? Okay, maybe I didn't mourn it. Let's say I legitimately didn't mourn it. I didn't really care about it. It wasn't relevant to me, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But now it's being rebuilt. Now I'm happy. And the Chachamim were saying, wait a second, not so fast. Okay, I see that you're happy, but not so fast. Those who mourn it are going to be privileged to celebrate it. So I'll tell you how I understand that Gemara. And it's very much in keeping with what we've been saying up until now. But I'll let's just talk about romantic comedies for a moment. So just help to explain it. So you've all seen romantic comedies at some point. You've got, and remember the essential structure of the romantic comedy, any romance is boy meets girl, right? That's act 1. Boy loses girl, that's act 2. Boy gets girl, that's act 3. Okay, that's your arc. By the way, I'll tell you just a nice screenwriting tip from, forgetting his last name, but his first name, but Hart was his first name. Anyway, he said the following, which is if you show a gun in the first act, it better go off in the third act. That interesting? That's just a total aside, but that's just some dramatic storytelling rules. But anyway, so imagine you're watching a romantic comedy, and you know the male lead, you got Hugh Grant, and then you got Julia Roberts, you got the female lead, and let's say Hugh Grant walks into this grocery store, and there's just a scene along the way, and there's a hilarious grocery store attendant in the movie. It's the funniest scene in the movie. You're laughing so much. Oh, this guy is hilarious. And you're watching the rest of the movie waiting for the grocery store attendant to come back. And then at the end, when they get married, you're like, your reaction is, where was the grocery store attendant? He was so funny. What's the point? The point is you didn't know what story was being told. You didn't know what story was being told. The Etruscans, is that how you say it? Never hear them. No one really talks about them, but that's one of these ancient peoples. They're not coming back. Anyone who's like taking these big long shot bets at Vegas, like I can't wait for the Etruscans to come back. They're not coming back. The story of the history of the world is the love affair between God and the Jewish people. And it's going to end with the Geula Shlema, and it's going to end with the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. And if you're following the storyline, which is the fact that we're in exile right now, and we're in Galus, and that, so to speak, the two romantic leads, so to speak, are separated, but they're going to come back. That's what it means to mourn the Beis HaMikdash. If you're appreciating the fact that we're not there yet, but the story of history is this love story, then when the couple gets back together, when the temple, as evidenced by the temple being rebuilt, when the temple is being rebuilt, you're going to be like, yeah! Because that's the story that you were involved in and experiencing the entire time. It's keeping our mind on track on what story is being told. But we have to apply it to our individual lives again. Because each one of us is like a fractal, right? A fractal is like a little piece that contains the whole. Each one of us is a fractal, and that story in some variation or another with whatever our individual personal challenges are, is being told about our own lives and what choice are we making? What is our Meraglim moment? I had a conversation. My daughter just came back from Israel, and there's a phrase that I really don't like at all, and I guess maybe there's some room for it, but I really feel like it's a very disrespectful phrase, and I feel like it's used a lot. And maybe mostly in terms of kids going away for their gap year to Israel and things like that, but I think it's sort of like in the lexicon, people use it. And that term is called flipping out. You may have heard it, you may have not heard it. And the reason why I think it's extremely disrespectful is, what does it mean that someone goes to yeshiva and they become frummer? And becoming frummer, or having more yira shamayim, or wanting to keep halacha more carefully, or wanting to study Torah in a more dedicated, regular way, is called, quote unquote, flipping out? What a chutzpah. What a chutzpah. Now, there are people who have a psychological condition, but to categorize anyone who wants to be more dedicated to Hashem and Torah as having sort of like a mental condition, what a chutzpah. What a chutzpah. But in terms of the discussions, I wanted to raise one point, and I don't know how well it went over in terms of the conversation that I just had over dinner. But anyway, I was trying to make a point, and here was the point. The point is that I hear so many conversations, and this is not my first kid who's gone through, the yeshiva experience in Israel, that the discussions are always like, okay, how are they right before they left? And then how are they right after they came back? As though the person's lifespan ends when they go through customs on the way back. In other words, you have in medicine, you have something called a false positive, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. No one wants a false positive. It's when you go for a medical test and it comes back, the person has X, Y, or Z, and then, it can turn your world upside down, and then they call back and they go, oh, no, sorry. It was a false positive. Okay, so then take the test again, and God willing, everything's okay. So I'm using this term false positive as sort of like a moment where it seems like, the election results have been tallied, and this is the conclusion of the discussion. What about, I don't think we were communicating yet, but now we're going to communicate. What about 5 years after they come back from Israel? What about 15 years after they come back from Israel? What about 25 years after they come back from Israel? What about 70 years after they come back from Israel? That's the question. That's the question. In other words, this idea of the discussion, and by the way, it's not a dumb discussion to have. And it's even perhaps in some cases an appropriate conversation to have, like in terms of making some sort of like, well, what was this year for you like? But what I'm trying to decouple right now, what I'm trying to sever right now is the implication that after the person comes back that is now who they are and who they will be, which is entirely not the case. How many people have come back, ultra frum, quote unquote, and then 5 years later, who knows where they're at? And so one of the things that I've really been trying to emphasize to myself and to whoever wants to listen and think about this is that you never arrive. We're talking about the spies going into the land. You never arrive. You see, somehow in their mind, how could it be? Let's try to address the question. How could it be that they're in the middle of the story, and I'm talking about objectively speaking, the story of the Chumash, objectively speaking, is the Jews going into the land of Israel. That's just what it is. You don't have to get deeper than that. That is the storyline, okay? How could the generation who's involved in that story get to the point where they're about to go into the land and they're going, whoa, no, we're not going into the land. That's your story. And so I'm going to give you one answer, and you can come up with your own answers. But I'm going to give you my answer. You know why? Because I think that they thought that they were the generation, listen carefully, who left Egypt. Do you hear the difference? Not the generation that went into the land of Israel. The generation that left Egypt. In other words, they thought on some level their work was done. Our job is to get out of Egypt. We got out of Egypt. I'm sorry, was I saying Egypt? Or did I say Israel? I may have misspoken.
Egypt.
I said Egypt.
Yeah.
Do you hear the difference? In other words, let me put it to you another way. In life, you can't just be running from one place. You have to be running toward another place. You can't just be leaving one place. That can't be your identity. I'm the guy who used to be this and I'm no longer that. Okay, so Mazel Tov. I'm sure that was very difficult and that's a big accomplishment. You used to be this and you're no longer that. That's great. But does that mean you're done? Does that mean that your entire life is going to be defined by, now I'm even more not that? Oh, I'm the most not that I've ever been. What is that? That's a life of literally looking backwards your entire life. We're looking forwards. What are you heading toward? What are you trying to become? And that process literally doesn't end till your last breath. And if it does end before your last breath, you think you got to your retirement home and now you get to sit down. That's made up. We even have it explicitly in the Torah itself. It says Yaakov Avinu finally got to the place where he wanted a rest. And God said, what are you talking about? And when Yaakov Avinu reaches that conclusion that I finally got through Esav, I finally have, I want to rest. Then the troubles with Yosef spring up. God says, you think you're done? You are so not done. We are not done till our last breath. And I'll tell you, there's only one thing if you want to make sure that you don't run out of gas. So then the question is, how do I avoid the problem of thinking that I'm done? How do I avoid that problem? How do I avoid running out of gas in the car in my journey of life? And there's only one answer to that question as far as I'm concerned. You want to add more answers? You're free to add more answers. I'm going to tell you the one answer. Learning Torah on a regular basis, preferably every single day. That is the only thing. That is the only thing that is going to keep you focused and understanding that you're not done. That is the only thing. Everything else is nice and is a support. I'll give you a scary image, and I've met people like this, and I tell you, it's frightening to me when I meet people like this. They look like, good community members, and they're even coming to shul and things like this, but they're like houses eaten by termites from the inside. From the outside, they look like a person and just like every other person in the row at whatever shul. But they have checked out, and they are like houses eaten from the inside by termites, and a strong wind, a strong rain might come, and I don't even want to know the end of that story. And why did they get eaten by termites? Because they stopped growing. Because they stopped learning. Specifically learning. And hearing a shir by the rabbi or hearing the lecture, for the rabbi at a certain point it turns from to learning Torah to becoming a movie critic and reviewing the speech. Right? What'd you think of this speech? I don't know, it's a little long for me, but had a couple of good moments. But is it on the level of learning even? So let's say it is on the level of learning, but that's not enough learning. You know, if you want to get to San Diego, right, you can't do it on 2 gallons of gas. If you want to get to 120, you can't do it on a once a week shear. Okay, good Shabbos, good Shabbos.